Ex-wife discovers a shocking truth about ex-husband. Can they move on or is it too late? Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main characters. Emily had always believed that her marriage to Jake was one of the strongest bonds she'd ever known. They had spent years together, sharing laughter, tears, dreams, and struggles. But as the years passed, something changed. It was subtle at first, small things that she brushed off, convinced they were just part of life. But eventually, the cracks in their relationship became impossible to ignore. The arguments grew more frequent, the silence between them more painful. After countless attempts to salvage what they had, Emily and Jake eventually decided to part ways, their marriage ending in a quiet, but definite, conclusion. Life after the divorce wasn't easy for either of them. Emily threw herself into her career, trying to fill the void left by the shattered pieces of her past. Jake, on the other hand, seemed to have moved on faster than she expected, spending time with friends and pursuing new interests. For Emily, the pain of the divorce was still raw. But she focused on herself, working to heal and rebuild. It wasn't until a seemingly ordinary day, when Emily stumbled upon a piece of information that would change everything. She was scrolling through her social media feed when a post caught her eye, a photo of Jake with a woman Emily had never seen before. It wasn't just any photo though. In the caption, Jake seemed to be talking about how he had been hiding his true self for years and finally found happiness. Emily's heart sank. A rush of emotions flooded her, betrayal, confusion, and most of all, shock. How could Jake, the man she had once shared everything with, have kept such a secret from her? And why was he sharing it now? Was this part of some new life he was trying to build, or was there more to this than she realized? Emily needed answers. She had spent so many years questioning the things Jake had kept hidden, but this was something else entirely. She knew she had to confront him, to finally get the truth. But as she prepared to reach out, she couldn't help but wonder, could this revelation change everything, or was it simply too late to fix what was broken? Emily sat in her small apartment, the glow of her laptop screen casting a soft light on her face. She had been scrolling through her social media feed, the familiar faces of old friends and family filling the screen, when something caught her attention. It was a post from Jake. She hadn't heard from him in months, not since their divorce, but there he was, smiling in a photo with a woman she didn't recognize. The caption was what stopped her heart. "I've been hiding my true self for years, but I'm finally happy now." Her breath caught in her throat as confusion, anger, and hurt flooded her mind. Had he really been hiding something from her? For how long? And why now, after everything, was he sharing this with the world? The post felt like a betrayal, a slap in the face to the years they had spent together. It wasn't just that he had moved on, Emily had expected that. It was the fact that this secret, whatever it was, had been kept from her all along. She stared at the screen, the words echoing in her mind. What had she missed? What had she been blind to? It was as if the entire time they had been married, there was something lurking in the shadows, something she had never known. She leaned back in her chair, her heart heavy with the weight of the discovery. This wasn't just about the end of their marriage anymore. This was about a truth that she had never been given. She had questions, so many questions. And she needed answers. Her fingers hovered over her phone, the temptation to reach out to Jake almost overwhelming. But what could she even say? What was there left to say after all this time? Emily thought about the last few months, how she had been trying to move on, trying to heal from the hurt. But now, this post had ripped open old wounds she thought had healed. It made her question everything. She had to know. She needed closure, even if it meant confronting Jake once again. But what if it was too late? What if the man she had known was long gone, replaced by someone else entirely? She felt a lump form in her throat. Was this revelation the final piece of the puzzle, or had she simply opened a door to more pain? Emily stared at the screen one last time before putting her phone down. She had made up her mind. She would reach out to Jake, but this time, it wouldn't be like before. She wasn't the same person who had left him. She had grown, and she needed to know if he had too. As she picked up her phone and typed out a message, she took a deep breath. This was it. There was no turning back now. Emily stared at her phone for what felt like hours. The message she had written was simple, but the weight of it hung heavily in her chest. She had finally decided to reach out to Jake, to ask him the questions that had been eating at her since she saw that post. With a deep breath, she hit send. The text read, "Jake, I saw your post. We need to talk. Please let me know when you're free." She immediately regretted it. What was she thinking? She had spent so long trying to move on from him, to distance herself from the hurt, and now here she was, about to open old wounds. But the curiosity, the need for closure, was too strong to ignore. As she waited for a reply, Emily's mind raced. She tried to calm herself, but the uncertainty of it all was overwhelming. What would he say? How would he react? Would he apologize, or would he defend his actions? The thoughts swirled in her mind like a storm, each one more confusing than the last. After what felt like an eternity, her phone buzzed. Jake's name appeared on the screen, and her heart skipped a beat. She opened the message. "Emily, I didn't think you'd reach out. I'm free tomorrow evening, let's talk." The reply was short, but it was all she needed. She quickly typed back, "Okay, see you then." She couldn't believe it. It was happening. She was going to face him again, to finally hear what he had to say. The next day passed in a blur. Emily couldn't focus on anything. She spent the day second-guessing her decision, wondering if it was really worth it to dig up the past. But deep down, she knew she had to do this. She had to know what had been going on, what had been hidden from her for so long. That evening, she found herself standing in front of the same coffee shop they had once frequented together. It felt surreal. She hadn't been here in years, not since they had started drifting apart. The memories rushed back, some good, some painful, but all of them a reminder of the life they once shared. Emily walked inside and looked around, spotting Jake sitting by the window. He looked almost the same, but there was something different about him. He seemed more relaxed, less guarded. Maybe it was the new relationship he had been talking about, or maybe it was just the way time had changed him. As she approached, Jake stood up and smiled, though there was a hint of hesitation in his eyes. "Hey, Emily," he said, his voice soft. "Thanks for coming." Emily nodded but didn't sit down immediately. She stood there, feeling the weight of the moment. "Let's get this over with," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Jake motioned to the seat across from him. "I know you have a lot of questions. I don't want to avoid anything, I promise. I just didn't know how to tell you everything." Emily sat down, her heart racing. She had so many questions, but she wasn't sure where to begin. She looked at him, trying to read his expression. Was he truly sorry for what had happened, or was he simply trying to justify it? "I saw your post," Emily finally said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "What did you mean by hiding your true self?" Jake's expression softened, and he sighed deeply. "It's complicated, Emily. I didn't know how to explain it then, and I still don't know if I can now. But I've been living a lie for a long time, and it took me this long to understand it. I wasn't being honest with myself, let alone with you." Emily listened, her mind racing. She had no idea where this conversation was going, but one thing was clear: Jake was about to open up in a way he never had before. Jake paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. Emily sat quietly across from him, her eyes fixed on him, waiting for him to explain what he meant by hiding his true self. He seemed hesitant, unsure how to find the right words to express the complexity of his feelings. "I didn't even realize it at first," Jake began, his voice low. "I thought I was just going through the motions, you know. I was playing the role of the perfect husband, trying to be the man I thought you wanted me to be. But deep down, I was suppressing parts of who I really am. Emily listened intently, trying to process what Jake was saying. It felt like a bombshell, but she couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and curiosity. You mean you were pretending to be someone else? She asked, her voice tight with emotion. Jake nodded slowly, avoiding her gaze for a moment. Yeah. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't want to disappoint you or make you think I was weak. So I buried it all. His eyes finally met hers, filled with regret. I think I've been doing that for years. Hiding from myself, from the truth. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. This was not what she expected. She had assumed that their problems had been about something more tangible, maybe miscommunication or unmet expectations. But now, it seemed there was something deeper, something about Jake that she had never fully understood. What do you mean by the truth? She asked, trying to make sense of his words. Jake's voice trembled slightly as he spoke. I was never fully honest with you, Emily. About who I really am, about my feelings, about the parts of me I kept hidden. I was so scared of losing you, of you seeing me as weak or different, that I didn't let myself be real. And by the time I realized it, it was too late. You were already starting to pull away. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. All those years they had spent together, and she had no idea that Jake was carrying this burden. The thought of him being so emotionally distant, so trapped in his own fear, made her ache for the man he could have been. But, at the same time, she couldn't ignore the anger she felt. All those moments when she had felt abandoned or unimportant, they now seemed to have a different meaning. So, all those years, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Were you just pretending? Were you ever really there with me? Jake's face softened with pain. No, I wasn't pretending to love you. I loved you with everything I had. But I was so focused on being the man I thought you needed, I lost sight of myself. I didn't know how to tell you that I was struggling, that I needed help. I thought if I showed any weakness, it would drive you away. Emily's heart was heavy with conflicting emotions. She had spent so long wondering what had gone wrong between them, why they had grown apart. But now, hearing Jake's words, she realized that the distance between them wasn't just about their relationship, it was about him. About the parts of himself he had hidden from her, and from the world. She wanted to understand, but part of her was still angry. Angry that he hadn't trusted her enough to open up, angry that he had carried this burden alone for so long. So what now? Emily asked, her voice strained. Is this something you can fix? Or is it too late? Jake looked at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. I don't know, Emily. I wish I had the answer. I know I can't undo the past, but I'm trying. I'm trying to be honest with myself now, and maybe, just maybe, I can be honest with you too. Emily sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She had never imagined a conversation like this, never imagined that the man she had loved for so long was hiding such a deep secret. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to move forward, if Jake was willing to face his truth and if she was willing to forgive. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a moment of realization, a moment where both of them were facing the possibility of change. Emily didn't know where they would go from here, but she knew one thing for sure: this conversation was only the beginning. The silence lingered between Emily and Jake, each of them wrestling with their own thoughts. Emily's mind was spinning with the complexity of their conversation, and yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It was as if, for the first time in years, they were truly facing each other, not as ex-husband and ex-wife, but as two people who had shared a life and now, perhaps, had a chance at understanding each other. She studied Jake, watching his every move as he shifted nervously in his seat. His eyes were filled with a mix of regret and hope, but Emily wasn't sure if she was ready to accept what he was offering. So, you're saying you've been hiding all this time? Emily asked, her voice steady but edged with emotion. Jake nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. Yes, I was. I was too afraid to let you see the real me. I thought if I showed you my true self, you would leave me. But I was wrong. I should have trusted you. His words hung in the air, and Emily could feel the weight of them pressing down on her chest. She wanted to believe him, to believe that he truly regretted his actions, but part of her still felt betrayed. All those years of silence, all those moments when she had felt alone, had they been because of Jake's fear, or was there more to it? And now, after everything, you think you can just fix it? Emily's voice was softer now, almost a whisper. I don't know if I can fix it, Jake replied quietly, his tone sincere. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just want you to know that I'm trying, and I'm not hiding anymore. I'm ready to be the man I should have been all along. Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. She had waited for so long for Jake to open up, for him to share his feelings, but now that it was happening, she wasn't sure what to do with it. Her heart ached for the man he could have been, but she also couldn't forget the pain he had caused. Jake, I don't know if I can just forget everything, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can go back to the way things were. Jake's expression softened, and he reached across the table, his hand resting lightly on hers. I'm not asking for that, he said gently. I'm not asking you to forget or to forgive me right away. I'm asking for a chance, just a chance to make things right. Emily pulled her hand back, not out of anger, but because she needed space to think. She was grateful for his honesty, but the truth was, she wasn't sure if she was ready to let go of the past. The pain was still too fresh, and the idea of opening up to him again felt like stepping into the unknown. I need time, Jake, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't just jump back into this. I need to figure out who I am now, without you. Jake nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. I get it, Emily. I do. I'll be here, waiting, whenever you're ready. Emily stood up, the weight of the conversation settling over her. As she turned to leave, she glanced back at Jake one last time. I don't know what's going to happen, but I need to find myself first. Jake didn't say anything more. He just watched her leave, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt a sense of clarity. Maybe it was too late for them, or maybe it wasn't. But for the first time, she knew that the decision was hers to make. Days passed after their conversation, and Emily couldn't stop thinking about what Jake had said. The words echoed in her mind, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't find a clear answer. The space she had asked for seemed to help at first, allowing her to breathe and think without the pressure of expectations. But as the days turned into weeks, the silence between her and Jake became heavier, and the weight of the unresolved tension lingered. Emily spent more time focusing on herself. She threw herself into her work, rediscovering parts of herself she had long forgotten. She took long walks in the evenings, enjoyed moments of solitude, and even began to reconnect with old friends she had lost touch with during her marriage. But despite her efforts to move forward, Jake's words kept creeping into her thoughts. She had always been the kind of person who valued honesty and transparency. Jake's confession about hiding his true self hit her hard because it made her question everything about their marriage. Was it all a lie? Had she been living in a fantasy, believing in something that wasn't real? One evening, as she sat alone at her kitchen table, Emily found herself staring at her phone again. She had thought about texting Jake, asking him more questions, seeking clarity. But she couldn't bring herself to do it. The truth was, she was scared. Scared of reopening old wounds, scared of what she might hear, and scared that she wouldn't be able to handle it. But she couldn't ignore the fact that she was still tethered to him in some way, no matter how hard she tried to distance herself. The next day, as Emily sat at a coffee shop working on her laptop, she saw a familiar face walk through the door. It was Jake. Their eyes met for a moment, and she could feel the tension between them immediately. Jake hesitated, then walked over to her table. Hey, Emily, he said softly, standing at the edge of her table. Emily looked up, surprised by his presence but not angry. Jake, she replied, her voice calm. I didn't expect to see you here. He gave a small, awkward smile before sitting down across from her. "I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about," he said. "I know I've asked a lot of you already, but I want to explain more. I owe you that much." Emily felt a rush of emotions, surprise, frustration, but also a strange sense of relief. She had been waiting for this moment, unsure if it would ever come. She nodded, giving him permission to speak. Jake took a deep breath before continuing. "When I said I was hiding my true self, I didn't mean it in the way you might think. It wasn't about lying to you or pretending to be someone I wasn't. It was more about me not being honest with myself about what I needed, about what I was feeling. I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know how to be vulnerable." Emily listened carefully, trying to understand. "And you thought that by hiding that part of you, you were protecting me?" she asked, her voice soft. Jake nodded. "Yeah. I thought if I could just keep everything together, you wouldn't have to see how broken I was. But I see now that it only pushed you away. I should have let you in, let you see all of me, flaws and all. But I was so afraid of losing you, I kept everything bottled up." The honesty in his voice caught Emily off guard. She had spent so much time wondering what had gone wrong, blaming herself for the failure of their marriage. But now, listening to Jake, she realized how much he had been struggling too. "Jake," Emily began, her voice trembling slightly, "I don't know if I can forgive you for everything. But I can see now that you're not the same person you were. You're trying to change, and that means something." Jake's eyes filled with gratitude. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Emily. I know I have to earn that. But I just wanted you to know the truth, to know that I'm trying to be better, for myself and for you." Emily sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She still wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like there was a glimmer of hope. Maybe they couldn't go back to the way things were, but perhaps, just perhaps, they could move forward in a new direction. She wasn't ready to make any decisions yet, but at least now, she knew that the possibility was there. Emily spent the next few days thinking about her conversation with Jake. The air between them felt different now, heavier but somehow more real. She had always believed that relationships, especially the ones that mattered, required complete honesty. Yet, as much as she wanted to hold on to the hope that things could change, she wasn't ready to rush into anything. She needed time to process everything, to let his words sink in, and to truly reflect on whether she could allow him back into her life in any capacity. She had spent so long being hurt by his silence, by his inability to be vulnerable with her. Could she really believe that he was different now? Could she trust him again? That was the question that lingered in her mind. Despite her uncertainty, she knew one thing for sure: she couldn't keep living in the past. As much as it hurt, as much as it felt like she was abandoning the memory of their shared life, she had to move forward. The past was a part of her, but it no longer had to define her. One morning, as Emily walked to her favorite cafe to grab a coffee, she ran into an old friend, Sarah. They exchanged a warm hug, and Sarah immediately asked how Emily had been. Emily hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'm doing okay. Just figuring some things out." Sarah raised an eyebrow, sensing that there was more to the story. "Figuring things out? Like what?" Emily smiled softly and looked down at her coffee cup. "Like life, I guess. And relationships." Sarah's expression softened. "You mean with Jake?" Emily's eyes flickered with emotion, and she nodded. "Yeah. It's complicated. I'm not sure where things are going, but I'm starting to think about what I want, not just about what happened between us." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I get it. You've been through a lot with him. But you deserve to think about yourself now. What makes you happy?" Emily let out a small sigh, feeling a bit of relief. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to remind her of that. For so long, she had focused on Jake's needs, his struggles, and his pain. But now, for the first time, she was beginning to focus on her own. "I guess I'm just learning how to put myself first," Emily said quietly. Sarah smiled warmly. "That's the best thing you can do. You can't fix someone else if you're not whole yourself." Those words stayed with Emily for the rest of the day. She had been so focused on healing their relationship, on making things right with Jake, that she hadn't considered whether she was truly ready to open herself up again. She had been trying to fix him, but maybe the real work was in fixing herself first. Later that evening, Emily found herself back at her apartment, sitting by the window as the sun set. She felt a sense of calm wash over her as she reflected on the conversation with Sarah. It was time to stop waiting for Jake to fix everything. She needed to take control of her own healing, her own life. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but she was learning to let go of the fear of what was next. The phone on the table buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. She picked it up. And it was a message from Jake. "Emily, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I know we still have a long way to go, but I hope we can keep talking. Whenever you're ready." Emily read the message twice before putting the phone down. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was in control of her own destiny. She wasn't ready to make any decisions yet, but she knew she was taking steps toward finding her own path. The past was a part of her story, but it no longer defined who she was or who she was going to be. Days passed, and Emily found herself growing more comfortable with the space she had created for herself. The constant pull between her past with Jake and her desire to move forward seemed to be fading, but she was still unsure about where this journey would take her. She had grown accustomed to her new routine, one that didn't involve constantly worrying about Jake or their fractured relationship. Her days were filled with work, walks in the park, and coffee dates with friends, and in the evenings she would unwind with a book or a favorite movie. But still, Jake's message lingered in the back of her mind. She had read it multiple times, weighing the possibilities of what he might want, and wondering whether she was truly ready to face him again. She had told herself that she needed time, but time was starting to feel like it was running out. Could she really move forward without ever confronting the past again? She couldn't shake the thought that maybe she wasn't just running away from him. Maybe she was running away from herself, from the part of her that had been so deeply invested in that relationship. One morning, Emily found herself standing at the door of the coffee shop where she and Jake had met weeks ago. She wasn't sure why she had come. Perhaps it was just for a change of scenery, or maybe, deep down, she was hoping to see him again. As she pushed open the door, the bell above it jingled, and she paused for a moment. The familiar feeling of the place, with its cozy chairs and the smell of fresh coffee, wrapped around her like a blanket. She stood at the counter, ordering a latte, her thoughts racing. As she waited for her drink, she glanced around and saw him. Jake was sitting at a table near the window, a book in front of him, looking lost in thought. Her heart skipped a beat. He hadn't seen her yet, and for a moment, Emily stood there, unsure of what to do. She could turn around and leave, avoid him completely, or she could walk over and face him, once again. She took a deep breath and walked toward him. Jake looked up as she approached, his expression a mix of surprise and relief. "Emily," he said softly, standing up. "I didn't expect to see you here." Emily smiled faintly. "I wasn't sure I would come either," she admitted, her voice steady. "But here I am." Jake gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Would you like to sit?" he asked, a hopeful look in his eyes. Emily hesitated for a moment before sitting down. The weight of the past few weeks was still there, but something in the air between them had shifted. It wasn't as heavy as before, but it wasn't entirely light either. It felt like they were both still trying to figure out what came next. "How have you been?" Jake asked, his voice gentle. Emily shrugged. "Better, I think. Still figuring it all out." There was an awkward silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes when two people know there is a lot to say but are unsure of how to begin. Finally, Emily spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation," she said, her voice quieter now. "About what you said. About hiding your true self." Jake nodded, his eyes darkening slightly. "I know I've asked a lot of you, and I don't expect everything to just go back to how it was. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying. I don't want to keep living in the shadows, pretending to be someone I'm not. Emily looked at him, really looked at him. She had heard his words before, but now, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, something inside her softened. She wasn't sure if this was the beginning of something new, but she could feel that something had changed between them. I don't know what comes next, Emily said, her voice steady, but filled with uncertainty. I don't know if I'm ready to go back to what we had, but I'm willing to see where things go. I need time, Jake. Time to figure out who I am now. Jake's expression was understanding, and he nodded. I get it, Emily. I really do. I'm not asking for anything. I just want to be here for you, in whatever way you need. They sat there for a while, quietly sipping their drinks, neither of them rushing to fill the silence. It was a different kind of quiet, one that felt more like a beginning than an ending. Emily wasn't sure if they would find their way back to each other or if they were simply two people walking parallel paths. But for the first time in a long while, she felt at peace with the uncertainty. The future was still unclear, but she was no longer afraid of what it might hold. Weeks passed since that quiet conversation in the coffee shop. Emily and Jake didn't rush into anything, but there was an unspoken understanding between them now. They had both made peace with the uncertainty, allowing themselves to take things one step at a time. Emily still wasn't sure where this would lead, but she had started to notice something changing inside her. She was no longer holding on to the past with clenched fists. Instead, she was learning to let go, to accept that life was a journey full of unexpected turns. As the days went by, they continued to stay in touch, texting occasionally, sharing snippets of their lives, but there were no expectations. Jake had given her the space she needed, and for the first time, Emily wasn't afraid to embrace her own feelings, her own desires. She wasn't looking to fill the void left by the past. Instead, she was discovering who she was without it. One afternoon, Emily decided to take a trip to a nearby park. She hadn't been there in years, but she felt like it was time to reconnect with the things she used to love. The sun was shining brightly, and the air was crisp with the promise of spring. As she walked along the path, her thoughts drifted to Jake. She wondered how he was doing, what he had been up to. But she didn't feel the familiar pang of longing she had once felt. Instead, there was a sense of calm. She realized that she wasn't waiting for something to happen anymore. She was content with where she was. As she sat on a bench, taking in the beauty around her, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from Jake. I've been thinking about you. It read. I know we haven't talked much lately, but I just wanted to check in. I'm here, whenever you're ready. Emily smiled to herself. She appreciated the message, but she also knew that her life was no longer defined by her relationship with him. She didn't need Jake to complete her, she had completed herself. It wasn't that she didn't care about him, but she had learned that love wasn't about filling a void. It was about two whole people coming together. After a few moments, Emily typed a simple reply. I'm doing well. I'm finding my way, one step at a time. I'm grateful for the time we've spent together, but I need to focus on me right now. She paused for a moment, then added, Thank you for understanding. She hit send, feeling a sense of relief. She wasn't closing the door on Jake, but she was no longer holding on to the past. The future, whatever it might hold, was hers to shape. As Emily stood up from the bench and continued her walk through the park, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The uncertainty of what was to come no longer felt like a burden, it felt like freedom. She wasn't sure where life would take her, but for the first time in a long while, she was at peace with the unknown. She didn't need to know the answers. She just needed to keep moving forward, trusting that everything would fall into place when the time was right.